Joining us right now with what we can expect from Zuckerberg and what the hearings mean for big tech, Ken Auletta, staff writer for The New Yorker. He's also author of Frenemies, The Epic Destruction of the Ad Business and Everything Else. And it's great to see you, Ken. Thanks for joining us this morning. Help us understand this. You know Mark. Tell us just about his own disposition in terms of his ability to handle what I imagine are going to be some withering questions this afternoon and tomorrow.
I mean, he basically is a prop, and he's a prop for the people who are going to perform on stage, today the senators, tomorrow the members of the House of Representatives. And they're going to hit him with a series of weathering questions. The question is, will they be good questions, or will they be kind of pose questions to make themselves look good? But when you think about him as a prop, he's a very inexperienced prop. He, like the people at Google and like the people in most of Silicon Valley, are very inexperienced in terms of dealing with the government. In fact, they grew up with a sense of disdain for the government, that it's inefficient. We're not going to make political contributions. We're not going to hire lobbyists. They've been forced to change that, to make political contributions, to hire lobbyists. But essentially, he's a teenager in terms of his experience dealing with public affairs. So I think you're going to see a guy who probably is not very experienced, will not handle this as well as he might. And the question is, will he, and as people are telling him not to, when he's asked those aggressive questions, those posed questions by people who are kind of praying and trying to show off, how will he handle it? Will he blow up?
Do you think there's been a transformation of Mark Zuckerberg, even in the last several weeks, as you've seen him go on this apology tour? We just learned this morning that he actually personally apologized to individuals in Myanmar. The reason I ask is you've spent a lot of time watching all sorts of titans transform over the years. I'm thinking of Bill Gates, the transformation of Bill Gates. You covered the antitrust trial. Bill Gates had started one way and has really transformed himself. Do you think that Mark Zuckerberg is going through that right now?
He might be. You know, he was a psychology major at Harvard before he dropped out. And he is someone who, when you talk to him, does tend to look at you, as opposed to many people in the Valley who look down at the floor when you're talking to them. But he's inexperienced. And he's a guy who his motto was move fast and break things at Facebook. They've changed that. But breaking things means that you're going to disrupt. And you enshrine the ability to disrupt the current ways of doing things. So is he going to be happy talking to members of Congress who the current ways of doing things? No.
What do you think the ultimate implication is here, not just for Facebook, but for the tech industry writ large? To the extent that regulation is coming, what does it look like?
Well, I don't know what it looks like, and I'm sure the regulators don't yet know what it looks like. I mean, the most extreme position is antitrust, break them up. Then you got things like, do you do what the European Union is doing, which is regulating privacy? And that's a real question. And one of the issues which doesn't get enough attention, when Sheryl Sandberg said the other day that you know, if you don't want ads, you're going to have to pay for Facebook. Well, the truth of the matter is 97% of Facebook's revenues come from advertising. And advertising gets that revenue because it can target people because it has that data. If you're going to deprive them of that data, and there are real reasons to deprive them of that data to protect privacy, then you're going to affect their ability to raise money through advertising.
But is there a way to build the mousetrap that also protects the privacy? We just had a guest on this morning. We were talking about how they advertise. They said Facebook, because guess what? The targeting works. And by the way, this was the goal. This was always the goal, to have better targeted advertising, not just from the advertiser's side, but at least the way I remember when we used to talk about this a decade ago, the argument was that we, the consumer, wanted to see ads that actually we were more interested in.
You are, but in order to have ads that you're more interested in, you have to know something about that person. To know something about that person requires the data, personal data. And that's a kind of trade-off and a question we have to face as a society. In Europe, they've made that decision in Western Europe, which is that you have to, we're going to protect the consumer, and they're forcing Facebook to behave under their privacy laws. The question is, will those privacy laws now extend to the U.S.? You wrote a column today, and I think it's an apt column, that the public doesn't seem to have an interest in privacy. The Congress now seems to have an interest in privacy. Will they move along that line, along the lines of what Western Europe has moved?
We're going to be talking to John Thune a little bit later about the questions that he is planning to ask. But if you had a question for Mr. Zuckerberg today, what would it be?
God, I have so many. My mind is just a jumble of questions for the guy. But essentially, you're doing this contrition tour, Mr. Zuckerberg. What is really going to change? Are you prepared to accept less data in order to protect privacy?
Well, the problem here, Ken, is that the message that would, allay the concerns of Congress, it seems almost to be at the opposite extreme of the message that would allay shareholders, right? I mean, if he's saying to Congress, yeah, I'm willing to accept change, I'm willing to accept regulation, I'm willing to hire more people, all those things are terrible news for shareholders. So he can get up there, and it could be a success in the eyes of Congress in terms of his performance, but it could be a disaster in the eyes of shareholders.
I think you're looking at balancing acts here. I mean, it's a seesaw. And if you restrict privacy, you're going to restrict the amount of money you can bring in, and therefore you're going to restrict the shareholders' rights to those benefits they seek by investing in Facebook. That's just inevitable. And then you say, as Sheryl Sandberg said the other day, well, if you don't want advertising, go to subscription. Can the public afford subscriptions? And will they afford subscriptions? That's a big question.
Can you know this landscape better than just about anybody? Is there any other competitor out there, whether it be Snap or Twitter or Google, that you think both either gets caught up in this or actually decides to take a decisive step or turn, if you will, on the privacy front and therefore somehow captures market share? One of the questions I had, it's sort of a piece of what the column was, I'm not even sure if this other option was available that people would necessarily take it.
Well, if you think back when Evan Spiegel started Snapchat, he made the argument, we are not going to collect the kind of data that Facebook does. We're going to protect your privacy more. Well, then he said, how do I get revenues? And in order to get revenues, you need advertising. In order to get advertising, you need the data. So he shifted his position, not the same as Facebook, but closer to Facebook's position on data. I don't see another, I don't see another competitor right now who's going to come in and take over. Now, if you were wrong in your column today, and I don't think you were, that people exit Facebook in droves, then that would create an opening for another social network. But right now, we don't have one.
Okay, Ken Auletta, we will be watching today. We always appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.